Hello, and welcome to Two Dancing Clams. This tutorial shows how to produce an SVG file suitable for use on a laser cutter from a 2D Blender file. Now, why you would want to use Blender to create SVG files is a good question, but in my searches around the web, I found it being asked a lot without a satisfactory answer. My motivation is to use geometry nodes to produce intricate designs that I would never have the patience or skill to create in a program such as Inkscape. This is also the reason I wanted a method to wrap a string to a curve using geometry nodes. Check out the link below for that one. This video will only use the Freestyle SVG and the SVG exporter add-ons that come with Blender. No outside programs or add-ons are necessary. I spent more time coming up with this method than anything else I have done in Blender. Most of my attempts that seemed to work failed because the SVG files produced would trace the same curve multiple times, making it unsuitable for use on a laser cutter. If somebody comes up with a simpler method than this and they care to share, please do so in the comments below. But I recommend checking for double curves first. I'm going to do a bit of YouTube sin and give you all the goodness up front. If this is enough to get you pointed in the right direction, great. If you want more details, then that's what the rest of the video is for. What we will do is take the original B-spline curve that's running along the top here and convert it to the top of a wedge triangle. Then we'll use the Freestyle SVG add-on to separate out only the lines, only the creases, as they call them, so only creases selected here. And we're looking for creases that have an angle of less than 40 degrees. So we've constructed this triangle to have a very narrow crease at the very narrow angle at the top and near 90 degrees at the bottom. Let's get on with the details. There's just a bit of setup we have to do at the top. Let's go into Edit, Preferences, go to the Add-ons tab, make sure that Node Wrangler is enabled, which it should be. Also, type in SVG and make sure both the Import-Export SVG and the Freestyle SVG exporter are on. I believe the top one is on by default, but the bottom one is off by default. Once those are enabled, you can come over to Render, make sure that both Freestyle SVG exporter is clicked on and the Freestyle is clicked on. Then go on down to View Layer Properties, scrolling down a bit, and under the Freestyle line set, we want to turn off everything except for crease, and we want to set a crease angle of 40 degrees. 40 is wider than the angle at the top, which is going to be about 10 degrees, and narrower than the angle at the bottom of the triangles, which would be close to 90 degrees. Lastly, go into Output Properties and go down to Output, and this is where the SVG files will show up as soon as you render the image. I'm going to leave it under Windows. This will be C:/temp by default, and that's fine for me. Now let's create some geometry nodes. Now, you can create the spline inside geometry nodes, and I almost always will, but just for ease of simplicity, let's go ahead and we'll just use this for the curve. No need to be fancy this time. First thing I need is a triangle to run along the curve. And to do that, we use a curved circle with a resolution of 3. Hello, triangle. I need to do some modifications on this with the set position. So the first thing I want to do is narrow it up. So I'm going to do that with vector math multiply. I'm going to leave the z and the x alone, but I'm going to turn down the y by about 80%. But you'll notice it's pointing sideways, and we want it to point up. So I will also rotate it. And I will rotate it by minus 90 degrees. Now we need a curve to mesh. And that we will use to take our original curve, and we'll use this pointy triangle as the profile for it. And now we have the gist of where we're going. So one thing I want to do before we move on is, it bugs me that this is halfway up the curve. So I'm going to use a bounding box, and I'm going to use the minimum value to offset this upwards. This also, like if you have other things going on, like a plane underneath everything, like I tend to do, this will push everything above it. And one very last thing is I want to have control over the size of this triangle. So I'm going to create an input node for it. And if I come back over here, I get to see that. And the other thing I know from experience is I want to have some pretty fine control over it. So I'm going to take whatever is given to me and divide it by 100. And I'm going to call this variable thickness. And that's an okay place to leave it. The reason for fiddling with this is that if the thickness is too big, then when you're working with fine patterns, the lines run into each other. It's hard to see what you're doing. If it's too thin, the curve can disappear from the Blender view altogether, and that's not good either. To get the output from this, I'm just going to go to a top view to remove all distortions, press F12 to render, and you should see just the line on top. Because everything's so small, it kind of blurs together, but this is the file that got produced in C:temp. If I double click on it on my system, it will come up in Inkscape. You can zoom in, and here's our lovely curve. And this is where despair hits me usually, because you'll see that this is the dreaded double line. Don't want that, but there is an easy fix. Take your curve. Now, if you want to preserve the original, this is a good time to do it, so I will. I'm going to duplicate, let it go. I'm going to hide this one. And this one, I'm going to go to Object, Convert to Mesh. This is a destructive operation, hence you might want to do it on a copy. Now if I render, looks the same. Bring it up into Inkscape. Voila! Now when we put it through the laser cutter, nothing will catch on fire. One of the things I love doing with the Glowforge is scoring and cutting cardstock to make everything from occasion cards to business cards. It is early days for my experiments combining Blender and laser cutting, but I put together this quick design to show the direction I'll be heading in, with complex shapes that would be impractical to do by hand. Let's go and press the magic button. And here's the final product. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video.